Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, gamer boys and girls, welcome back to the pod. We've been on a short hiatus as life slapped us with some changes in life, but now we are back at it again. So with that, let's jump right into the September 2022 bundle.
Quite possibly the grandest of grand strategies, Crusader Kings 3 tasks you with piloting your dynasty through the insanity that was medieval Europe and its surroundings. Starting off from a lowly barony, maybe holding a castle, a city, and if you're lucky a temple of some sorts, the limit and the goal is pretty much whatever you set your mind to. The most obvious task to set yourself is obviously conquering the entire continent, but who knows, you might just be into breeding the ultimate lineage of children through carefully selected marriages, hunting the juiciest inheritable traits, or why not try and concoct a brand new faith and attempt to get everyone else on board with it. Hell, if that's your thing, you could probably even just train a dynasty of assassins and murder everyone for the sake of doing so. Admittedly, the visuals won't test the limits of your top-of-the-pops ray-tracing RTX graphics card, but that was never the idea either. The appeal of the CK series is all the workings under the hood, the ridiculous amount of options at your disposal through warfare, diplomacy, your board of counselors, and so on and so forth. If you're into that sort of thing, having the freedom to manage your own empire down to the smallest tidbit, coming up with goals to accomplish for yourself, sort of playing a sandbox strategy, Crusader Kings 3 will be right up your alley.
The Race Quit team had an excellent idea to stage a video game on downhill, or that particular discipline in which crazy mountain bikers rode themselves at immoderate speed down extreme descents, trying to avoid obstacles and perform long treks. But instead of proposing a classic simulation anchored on the real experience, with Desceners they have introduced strongly arcade elements approaching imaginative interpretations such as trials, but still maintaining a certain attachment to the sport to which the game refers. In this way, it is possible to shape the sports experience in a more free way, introducing additional elements and enriching the gameplay, making the game more multifaceted and stimulating, in a word, fun, and at the same time more attractive for a wider audience. Freedom of movement is the basic element on which Desceners is built, which is evident both in the central hub from which you can access the game options, consisting of a large map, freely explorable by bike and equipped with various gradients and structures to perform tricks, both within individual races. The dynamics of the race remain substantially the same in the different game modes proposed, which at the moment foresee two practically corresponding types of career, except for a different way of dealing with the progression of the character and multiplayer mode, in which you are faced in a company of other players on the screen, the same tests present in the single player, but with a direct competition between the cyclists in the game and with the rules that can be established independently. During the races a route is proposed to get to the finish line at the bottom of the valley, but there is no compulsion to follow it, with the possibility of leaving the path, independently choosing any paths within the open world structure of the various settings. There are clearly incentives to stay on track, but based on the situation in which we find ourselves, we can strategically choose whether to follow the imposed path or cut through valleys, woods and cliffs to reach the finish line more quickly, thus bypassing obstacles and the ability to perform tricks. Sounds pretty weird, but Desceners is a downhill game with roguelike elements. These are suggestions rather than properly defined characteristics, but in the progression system it is possible to notice traces of the tradition referred to the historical RPG. In career mode, every time we start the game we have 4 lives at our disposal, at the end of which we are forced to start from the beginning, keeping the unlocked objects and the previous accumulated reputation level, as well as the possibility of opening gates permanent to the most advanced settings, overcoming some particularly demanding tests. To extend lives, and therefore the possibility of going further, special objectives come into play, which are placed randomly at the beginning of each race, requiring you to achieve certain performances before crossing the finish line, for example reaching a certain speed, not braking, perform specific tricks, and other special requests. In this way, the choice of following the path and exploiting the obstacles to perform the stunts, or giving up everything to run at breakneck speeds towards the finish line, becomes somehow strategic in case you want to try to expand the reserve. Another bizarre feature which helps to build Desceners' strong identity is the ability to choose which race to face within a sort of map, following their own path that leads to the final test. Each setting offers a wide range of possible races to take part in, each characterized by particular elements of challenge, the different balance between steepness, tortuosity and acrobatics, which are the basic elements of each track, and are added random modifiers such as different climatic conditions and more complex lightning or obstacles than usual. Once again, it is up to the player to decide which path to take to get to the boss, which here is represented by a level placed at the end of each setting and characterized by a particularly demanding challenge, usually a crazy leap that defies the laws of physics, and after passing the boss, you access the next setting with the possibility of opening a persistent shortcut if you win the final challenge several times. Desceners manages to conquer even those who are not fond of extreme sports, keeping in balance between simulation and the most extreme arcade, opening up to different approaches and styles of play. In this sense, this game is the heir of the great extreme sports games that came out between the 90s and the 2000s, putting gameplay first and building around it a game that has references to the sport taken into consideration, but bent first of all to the needs of the video game. Its peculiarities managed to build a strong identity for Desceners. And all in all, it was great fun. It's a good game, albeit not the greatest one, but you can pick it if you want to feel the rush.
Coming to the bundle from Roguelitesville this month is Crown Trick, hoping to make a splash through the rare choice of being turn-based. I guess it worked for Crypt of the Necrodancer, however, Crown ditches the rhythm game aspect for pure tile and turn-based goodness. Playing as Ellie, you find yourself in the Nightmare realm, and your talking Crown buddy informs you the only way out is finding the big bad and taking him to town, which of course will come in the form of fighting your way through level after level. You've got all the usual aspects of the genre at your proposal, starting out weak, procedurally generated weapons, trinkets and levels, currencies to spend on growing stronger both mid-runs and after you fail or succeed in a run, yada yada, all of that stuff. Good news is, you also have teleports sprinkled throughout each floor of the dungeon to speed up your running back and forth, removing a huge pain in the butt aspect, but unfortunately the ever annoying busywork of smashing up barrels of resources is still here to annoy the living hell out of you. As for the turn-based aspect, it works fairly well. You can take as much time to think as you want, you can hover over enemies or traps to check what they are up to next round, area of effect attacks are well telegraphed, props to the devs for the adaptation. All that being said, there's just something missing, some secret spice or juice, anything to make me want to come back, but as it stands, as average as this one is, it'll probably just collect virtual dust on my Steam shelf.
Industria is a shooter with a strong emphasis on the narrative sector that is inspired by the sacred games of the past, such as Half-Life and Bioshock. Nobody would like to receive a call in the middle of the night, least of all from a loved one. Nora, the protagonist of Industria, knows it well. Who have dozed off on the sofa at home illuminated by the light of the television, hears the phone ringing. On the other side of the phone is Walter, colleague and companion of the scientist, who communicates to her, in a state of anxiety mixed with excitement, two important news: the fall of the Berlin Wall and the worrying malfunction of Atlas, the artificial intelligence that the couple is working on. The conversation suddenly ends and Nora is forced to go to the research facility to help her boyfriend. On the spot, the situation is completely out of control. The alarm signals are the only sounds emitted by the speakers of our monitor, and there is no trace of life. In a race against time, the woman manages to reach the center of the plant, where she witnesses a paranormal event that catapults her into a ghost town of Naheulbeuk 20 years after the fall of the wall. Know in this regard that the prologue of the adventure is the highest quality. It takes the player totally disoriented and abandons him in a dystopian future in which the human race no longer exists, or almost, if we count the mysterious figure that will guide us in the 3 hours necessary to conclude the journey. Soon the protagonist will come across aggressive robots driven by Atlas itself. The engine of the game is its narrative component, extremely fascinating and capable of continually teasing the user. Understanding what happened to Atlas, Walter and the human race will push us to continue in the game, hoping to find answers to all our questions. However, satisfying and intricate the plot of Industria leaves too many questions unanswered, mainly due to the brevity of the campaign, but in a game in which the narrative sector is so important, all this is, frankly, paradoxical. The gameplay of Industria presents an excellent mix between exploration and firefights, with the latter particularly successful in indoor environments. In the first hour, the focus is on well-structured environmental puzzles, in which it will be of fundamental importance to interact with the environment. To make this the first part of adventure tachycardic, it will be the feeling of being at total mercy of Atlas. Nora will not have weapons, but only a flashlight and pickaxe. She will suffer high damage and will be able to collect a small number of healing vials. In the second part of the title instead, the map opens to free the protagonist of all those anxieties that before oppressed her, transforming her into a real war machine, submachine gun, shotgun or sniper rifle. Also, thanks to the more than sufficient quality of the shooting, will make the offensives of the few opponents vain, 5 in all, who will try to hinder our rescue mission. Attack patterns are frankly predictable. 4 of 5 enemies will just run against the scientist, and ammunition, which was initially in short in supply, becomes readily available. In this way we end up breaking that initial formula charged with tension that we find fortunately in some singular exploratory phases. Unfortunately, the absence of boss fights, which could have given further lifeblood to the gameplay, should also be noted. The available imaginary is immense, and also for this reason I find the absence of a major confrontation is a lack of a certain weight. Despite the linearity that distinguishes Industria, in fact, the player is still left free to visit abandoned buildings and collect shotgun cartridges or documents that reveal important fragments of lore. In these cramped rooms, the brightness is very low. In a stage of perennial alert, our only salvation against possible ambushes are a gun and a flashlight. From an aesthetic point of view, the work done by the Svolve development team is truly remarkable. The general lighting is great, and Naheulbeuk, whose architecture is inspired by the cities of Berlin and Prague, with an eye to the atmosphere of Half-Life, exudes the style from every pixel. In my opinion, Industria succeeds as a story-driven first-person shooter, despite its shortness and some minor graphic glitches as well.
Forgive Me Father offers a retro-inspired FPS experience, and turns out it's more enjoyable than one would expect. On the surface, Forgive Me comes with as simple as a stick core loop, hop into the level and keep moving forward down the corridors, murdering all the Lovecraftian nastiness you come across. To do so, you'll have an expanding arsenal of weapons, nothing especially noteworthy to be fair. Pistol, shotgun, Tommy gun, you're not gonna shit yourself, I didn't either. It does get a bit more interesting when you start gaining levels and can spend your points on a skill tree. Among the many passive upgrades, there are actually a few that change the weapons. For example, trading a single pistol for dual wielding, or your Tommy gun into a laser weapon. There's also a hint of exploration to be had. As you get deeper into the game, levels will have more and more secret areas that'll either refill your ammo, HP and armor, or offer special weapons for short-term use. Certainly not everyone's gonna love the looks of Forgive Me, but I like the visual design direction that heavily reminds me of Darkest Dungeon. Background music makes sense, the different sounds of enemies are recognizable. It's just the voiceover of the female character that is flat out horrendous. After the first 30-ish minutes of playtime, I was sure Forgive Me Father is a decent little FPS title that tips its head towards the good old, but I was kind of getting over it already. I think it was the subtle surprises in enemy design that won me over. For example, the zombies that simply just don't care about receiving a headshot, they just go ahead and replace the head that you just shot with another one they held in their hand a second ago. And during the remainder hour and a half, as I said, it just grew on me. I found myself more and more excited to get going with the next level, especially seeing how they just usually last 5 to 10 minutes tops, which is the perfect bite-sized pacing to hop on hop off between whatever else you might be doing.
Just Cause 4 is a toy for gamers, a real virtual amusement park made up of vehicles, explosions and extreme chaos. From this point of view, the developers have not denied themselves, delivering to the fans of the series exactly what they expected. A large sandbox in which to indulge themselves by blowing up anything, launching from incredible heights, gliding between the mountains and facing for the first time a scenario, the South American but fictional island of Solace, characterized by 4 different biomes that present truly peculiar weather conditions. The unusual presence of such variable situations is somehow linked to the plot of Just Cause 4, which sees the protagonist Rico Rodriguez busy investigating the past of his family and the work done by his father in relation to devices designed for weather control. After a first impact that is anything but friendly with the bizarre climate of Solace and with the troops of the Black Hand, the private army that controls the territory, Rico manages to prevent his friend Mira and her companions from being killed, giving life to the yet another front of liberation, the Army of Chaos. The contribution of the rebel forces toward the completion of the campaign will be fundamental, since to follow the main mission of the story linked to 4 specific operations, we will first have to advance our army by conquering various regions of the map after liberating the relative bases. It takes just a few minutes to get familiar with the gameplay of Just Cause 4, which does not differ from what was seen in the previous episodes of the series, except for the addition of some elements, in this case the new gadgets for the grappling hook and the fire function. The problem arises that these innovations have been introduced with the social implications in mind. An intelligent move by Avalanche Studios, which however collides with the reality in which many of these possibilities are not really exploited during the action in-game, simply because it is more practical to resort to traditional maneuvers between weapons, grappling hook and any reinforcements. The quest in which the exploitation of the new mechanics is compulsorily placed, moreover often turn out to be inconsistent and hasty. The Just Cause 4 map is very large, and there is no doubt that observing it from above represents a suggestive spectacle, especially during some hours of the day, but besides the wild nature of Solace, there is actually not much to explore. The bases that we will have to task of freeing and the urban areas of the scenario have in fact a generic aspect, with an obsessive repetition of the assets that goes in hand with the gameplay mechanics in which the same situations always alternate. Activate consoles and wait for the hacking system, reaching a series of devices within a time limit, freeing prisoners and escorting them to exit, destroying or deactivating generators, or defending positions from attack by hostile troops from a certain period of time. Even in terms of technical implementation, Just Cause 4 focuses on performance and the implementation of a complex physics, albeit unlikely in many ways of its facets, which the Apex graphics engine seems to manage without particular problems. Boasting surprisingly fast loading on PC, especially when you consider the extent of the map, the game offers breathtaking views and convincing rendition of the elements, but if you look a little closer, there are plenty of concessions to an older generation design between textures. Blurry materials arranged a bit haphazardly, and in general, an artistic direction not exactly in step with the times, very far from the most noble productions. Just Cause 4 tries to take the scenario to a further evolutionary step, but sadly without success. it must therefore be satisfied with offering an enjoyable, more of the same, with some interesting innovation that however affect the concrete less than expected. For the rest, the game is the usual large and fun sandbox in which to indulge themselves with vehicles, weapons, gadgets and thunderous explosions. Fans of the franchise may not have expected anything else, but they too will inevitably have to deal with a rather repetitive structure and with a progression that is articulated in a controversial way. Perhaps due to the desire to immediately show a potential of this virtual playground. For these reasons, it gets a 2 point from me.
Shapez is an intriguing blend of puzzle game, management, and somewhat of an idle game, even though it even states it isn't one. Core gameplay is simple as a nail: gather a certain shape and deliver it to the indicated area. To start out, you'll just place extractors and direct the produce to the collection point via conveyor belts. Then, one after another, you'll unlock additional machinery to rotate, cut, split, mix, paint, and so on, as the required shapes get more and more intricate. Doesn't this sound extremely exciting? Well, fuck no, it doesn't. However, it's surprisingly satisfying. There's a certain relaxing zen vibe that comes from fiddling with the tools at your disposal, figuring out first of all how to even put together whatever shape is currently being requested. Then once you've managed to put together some clunky contraption that barely even works, you can move on to streamlining production, making it more efficient, adding additional production lines, or whatever your heart desires. Looking at the box, Shapez isn't an extremely exciting offering, but I enjoyed every minute spent with it and can only recommend you give it a try if you're looking for something, let's say, relaxing.
I'm gonna butcher this for sure, but the Dungeon of Naheulbeuk, the Amulet of Chaos, is a truly great game. The plot revolves around a bizarre team tasked with finding a statuette inside of the Naheulbeuk dungeon. The 7 members would just like to take the artifact and leave quickly, but they find a cursed amulet that will get them into trouble. Making fun of all fantasy products, especially Dungeons and Dragons, each character is characterized by a name which identifies their race or class. In fact, the ranger, the elf, the dwarf, the barbarian, the sorceress, the ogre, and the thief are present. Proceeding through the story, you can also choose to add another character to your party, between the cleric, the paladin, and the minstrel. All the characters fit perfectly into the stereotypes they embody, and for this reason, their lines, though often predictable, they are very funny. The cast of voice actors is very skilled at making the parodic extremes of the character's character, and well, they can certainly manage to get some laughs. The game offers interesting and complex turn-based strategic gameplay. While exploring the dungeon, you can move around for as long as necessary, collecting useful items. It is one of these occasions that the different abilities of the various characters can be exploited. For example, the thief can deactivate traps, while the orc manages to break through the doors to open new passages. Exploration is of course always followed by the fight with enemies. In battle, there is a turn order to respect, depending on the value of courage, a characteristic similar to speed or initiative in other games. In addition, there are also other values like agility, strength, intelligence, and so on. The battlefield features cover, suitable for characters specializing in long-range attacks, traps, and explosive barrels. Among the most interesting mechanics there is certainly that of the attacks of opportunity, an extra attack when an enemy moves to a square adjacent to that of a character, and randomia, a bonus that will be activated if the enemies fail several attacks. By earning experience points in battle, you will also be able to choose from some specific skills to be assigned to each character. There are 4 game difficulties: easy, normal, difficult and very difficult, and the Iron Man options, in which if you lose one battle, you will have to restart the game from the beginning. A particular feature of the title is the difficulty, Since there is an artificial intelligence that punishes the smallest errors even at normal difficulty, it almost feels like you are fighting a real player, as he will try in every way to hit the characters with less life to knock them out. Also, when the battle is over the player's favor, the AI will try to lead the surviving enemies to exit the dungeon to make the player gain less experience and items, even at normal difficulty, therefore the game experience is excessively punitive. The environments of Dungeon of Naheulbeuk, the Amulet of Chaos, are detailed and diverse. The cartoon graphics are very pleasant, and its sometimes bizarre and clumsy style combines well with the humor present in the title. The very vivid and bright colors work well in both relaxing and darker environments. The settings are accompanied by music suitable for various contexts, and recall the style of cartoon for children. This game is a title that blends traditional fantasy characters and turn-based tactical gameplay well, and the jokes are on point along with the voice acting. It is a great title, especially for fans of this genre, who can find an exciting challenge in the gameplay.
After a busy month in August, by the way, Omno was the best title out of that batch, you should check it out if you haven't yet. I was dead eager to check out what's on offer this time around, and it definitely started out good seeing the two leading titles, Crusader Kings 3 and Just Cause 4. Mind you, I couldn't care less about Just Cause, but I've been eyeing CK for some time now, so that's some happy looting in the bag already. I don't think it would come as a surprise to anyone if I said it placed on the top. It might be a niche genre, but it's undeniably a great game. And actually there were a surprising amount of others joining CK on the throne: Shapez, Forgive Me Father, and the unpronounceable Dungeon of Naheulbeuk are also titles you should give a shot. Just Cause comes in leading the mid-tier and is swiftly joined by Crown Trick, Desceners and Industria. As usual, these titles aren't poop either, they're just not good enough to go out of your way to experience. With a total 20 points out of the maximum 24, the September bundle celebrates kids returning to school by topping this year's chart. Good on you, September, good on you. As always, don't forget YouTube appreciates if you do YouTube things for the machine hive mind, and we'll see you again next month.